into it. So for everyone that's just joining now, I'm Patrick. I'm the CEO of Frontly, and this is Justin, support lead. And today we're just going to be going over all of the awesome features that we've released in the last month or so. And then I'm going to give a sneak peek of one or two features that are coming out soon. So whether you're a brand new user to Frontly or whether you're a very experienced user, this webinar will still be pretty interesting. And hopefully this just gives you a little bit more of an opportunity to understand and think about some of the features that we have launched beyond just reading a help doc or something like that. You know, we try to make videos announcing the new features as well, but it's nice to just talk through some of them in real time. So yeah, I think, you know, I won't, we're just going to kind of go through features one by one. So if anyone's joining a little late, it won't really be a big deal. There'll also be a webinar recording, I think, sent out to everybody automatically. So, you know, we can just get started, I think. So what I've done is I've created a test app for this webinar specifically, and I've created pages for all the different topics that I want to cover just to help guide me and also to sort of compartmentalize the different things that we're looking to cover. So let me share my screen of my Frontly app. And in fact, I'll just share my entire screen because I've got Google Sheet tabs and all of that fun stuff. So Justin, you can confirm if I've done this correctly. So I'm officially sharing my screen. Can you see everything?
Yeah, it looks good. You're showing the webinar test page, are you?
Which one? Or like
Sorry.
this, the Frontly dashboard? Yeah, I mean, we got a few pages here. So
Awesome.
Cool. So I mean, one of the cool options that we added to Frontly is the ability to integrate with your Airtable. So this is new. It's still technically in beta, but all that means is there's just a few features that aren't totally implemented yet. For the most part, it's functional. All the standard stuff is functional. So I mean, this is nothing too fancy. Really, it just looks like any other data source. So I went through on my data sources page, and I was able to click this connect to Airtable. And then that takes you through the classic auth flow where a pop-up will say, you know, do you want to connect your Airtable to Frontly? That just gives us authorization to be able to make those requests to your Airtable bases. And then from there, it's completely standard. So, you know, I did it on this page. I can even do it again just to show you. I mean, it's just like any other thing. You add a table or a grid or a form, and your Airtable bases that you've imported will just appear here, just like any other Google Sheet or Supabase. So in this case, my e-commerce products is the one. And if I go into my app, really there's nothing too special about this other than it's powered by my Airtable. So I mean, it's a classic Frontly app. I can edit records, I can delete records, I can create records. And right now, the only thing that you really can't do, there's essentially two things right now. There's analytics. So it's sort of the chart and stat block are not currently supported because Airtable has a limitation of a certain number of records maximum per request that we can pull in. And so it's not like a Google Sheet where we can just kind of pull the whole sheet. So we might be able to find some workarounds for that for people who are looking to do charts and stats. But for all the standard data management stuff in Frontly, triggering actions, all that kind of stuff, you'll be able to do that. And there's also relational data for Supabase, for Airtable, which will be coming soon, but we're just working through that. So that's one of the features that we've released in the last probably month or so. Now, there are a lot, so I'll try to work through them here. I'll just try to go in order so that I don't get too lost here. So I have this clear local state. This is a really quick one, so I don't need to spend too much time on it. The local state is essentially just a way to store data in your user's session. So should really probably be renamed to session state because that's really what it is. When your user logs in, you can at any time from a button click or anything like that, you can set a value in real time. So I'll show you the setup for this page. So I have this text block here, and it's using the variable of local state dot favorite fruit. So this is just a field that I just invented. It doesn't have to exist in my spreadsheet or anything like that. I could call it whatever I want. And because I'm using a variable here, it's going to take a dynamic value. And so in this case, when the page loads, there's no value here. And so nothing is showing. But I've set up this button to set the local state to the word apple, my favorite fruit. And the new action that we just launched, although this is very simple, this is just like the most literal way you could use local state. I think for the most part, people are using it for slightly more advanced features like using it in a display condition to show and hide a block. So maybe I could show that quickly. But the new action is the clear local state, and it does exactly what it sounds like. It allows you to just completely nuke your entire local state. It just there wasn't really an option before to just clear everything, and so some users had a use case where they wanted it to automatically clear when the page loads or something like that. And so we do have this page load action where if you add a local state step, where's the update local state, and then it's within the update local state action. If you turn on the clear, that will just automatically clear the state when that page loads. So that's something that you can keep in mind in your app building journey. So I'm going to go back to the list of pages here. Now, the content library. This is a new feature. It's also very simple. We don't have to talk about it too much, but the content library, it really isn't a page. So I just put this here to remind myself. Content library is actually in the settings here. So I don't have anything in my content library, and all it is a place for me to store text content that I can then go and use inside my AI prompts, essentially. Technically, you could use it in some other places. It's almost like, in some sense, it's almost like a permanent version of a local state where I guess technically you could pull these values in, but it's not meant to be edited in real time. It's really meant to be used in a way where I can say, product generation prompt, and then the key will be called, product generation. So the key is just you'll find this all over the app where we have you set either a key or an ID depending on what you're creating. All that ever really is just a unique identifier for yourself to be able to reference this. So I usually try to use this casing here, which is called snake case, where everything is lowercase, and then instead of spaces, you use an underscore. This is just a developer way of doing things, but essentially it's a recommendation because it means that there's absolutely no ambiguity around any kind of capitalization when you're trying to reference this throughout the app, and also spaces. So you don't want extra spaces, you don't really want capitals. You can though if you want to. It just means you have to be even that much more consistent with how you type those things in. So this is my recommendation whenever you're setting a key, is do something like that. And now in this example, I will actually have a product generation with AI in one of my other features I'm going to show off here. So I can write a prompt here that says, generate 3 products in the beachwear category. And really, I could go a lot further. I could have some variables in here if I wanted to, but we don't have to go much deeper into this. All you need to know is that if you wanted to have a really big prompt, you could fit that in here and then you can save it. And then when you're actually using an AI action in your app, you can reference this directly instead of having to basically retype this out. Or if it's really big, it just kind of makes it easier to reference. So I'm just going to go back to my list here of my pages. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second just to sort of check back in and make sure. Now, Justin, do we have any questions or comments so far that we think we'd like to
Yeah, I
touch
just
on?
responded to Frank in terms of understanding if there are any speed and performance advantages to using Airtable. I
Mm.
think it can be assumed that it's definitely a database built more at scale than something like Google Sheets. But can you speak to any particular advantages between that and our Superbase integration right now?
I I haven't actually tested Airtable versus Supabase enough to be able to really comment on the comparison between those two. I think there are some differences in terms of cost. I think Supabase has a much more generous free plan. I think it's because Supabase is open source, and so they do have funding, and they're a very successful company, and so they're very stable. But I think they have, from what I saw, it seemed like you could almost use it for free unless you were at like a pretty big scale. I think Airtable is not that way. I think people tend to complain that Airtable is a bit expensive, but a lot of people still ask for it, so we decided to integrate it. The biggest difference, really, when you're thinking about these data sources, is like if you're going to have more than a few thousand records in a table, then most likely you're going to want to use either Supabase or Airtable. They are pretty different, though, in the sense that Airtable has some other, kind of fancy features in this, more of like a spreadsheet style interface. Supabase is literally a database. It's just simple. So I think that if you just want it for data storage and you're planning on using Frontly for the visualization and building an app with it, then my recommendation is still probably Supabase, but depends on your needs. So in terms of speed, I think probably we'll be able to do some tests soon, but I would say they're probably comparable. The idea is that both of them are just loading a limited amount of results per page instead of loading the entire database all at once. So that's the main difference between Google Sheets and either of those. Important distinction for sure. So I will jump back in and share my screen again. So, okay, I'll try not to go too fast. I'm a fast talker and there's a lot to cover here, but um, turns out generate records is actually the next on my list anyway, and I was alluding to it in the last step with the content library. So, uh, Justin, I honestly, off the top of my head, I can't even remember, how do I access a variable from the content? Is it just content dot my variable name? Is that how we did it?
I just think you referenced the key with the content variable. It's
Let's double check. I build
let's
so
double
many features, I don't even remember how they work half the time. So let's just see. So okay. So I'll just talk through what I'm doing here. I can get rid of the styles tab. So I'm going to show you how you can use the AI powered generate records action to generate multiple new rows for your data source with AI. It's very cool. We've made it very easy to use, and all I have here is a table that just has my Google Sheet products in it. So here's my products list. It's like very, very basic, just some generic sort of e-commerce products. And then I have a button. Now, I already went in previously and I set up a little bit, but I'm actually going to delete this just so I can show you all what is required. So just keep in mind, all I did was add a button. And then I also just happen to have a table on this page that is displaying some products. So I'm going to go trigger the generate records action. And as we were alluding to before, so I could type my prompt in here, no problem. Most of the time you can probably do that. We've seen that as users are creating interesting AI aspects of their app, sometimes the prompts are pretty long and it gets a bit messy to try to manage it all in here. So that's why the content library exists. So what I'm going to try doing is I'm going to just type in two brackets on the left and I'm going to say content dot, and then I'm going to paste or I could type product underscore generation. And we are fingers crossed that this is the correct way to use it. And so this should essentially just inject my entire prompt, which I set up in my content library, into this spot. So you can see it's just nice and clean. If I was doing a lot here, I might even want to combine them. So I might, technically I might want to have more text up here and then also have this. And that's probably a better use case for it, is if you're kind of combining multiple different things with variables as well, that's something that you can do. So I'm keeping this generate records very, very simple. I'm not adding any sort of dynamic aspect to it. I'm just saying generate 3 products in the beachwear category. That's it. And so what I'm going to do is I've entered my prompt, which we set up in the last step, and then I'm going to just select my Google Sheet, which has some products in it, as I showed you here. And so all we're expecting is that the AI is going to generate 3 more records that look kind of like these. But in this case, I asked for the beachwear category. So we'll see what it generates. If I don't check off this box, enable AI response view, then the records will just immediately be created. And that's it. But if I check this off, then it will generate these records and it will prompt me in a little interface to sort of review the data that's generated. So let's just see what happens. And with this action, all of that is handled automatically. So that's what's really cool about it, is that there's a lot of logic behind the scenes, pops up a little modal and stuff like that. So let's go into the app. I'm just going to refresh because I've made some changes. And then I'm going to go to my generate records page. Now, fingers crossed, hopefully we set this up correctly. So I'm going to click generate records. You can see there's this little spinner while this is loading. And now, beautiful, we have this automated pop-up that allows me to review the data that was generated by the AI. These are new records that we might add to our sheet. I can even delete here or I can make changes. But if I like them, I can just hit save. Those now, because I selected that spreadsheet, are added to my table. And that's, that's that. It's basically one or two small steps to have this very cool AI generation system. Now, I think it's important to maybe show one more slightly advanced use case for this, just so you can get a sense of the dynamic nature. So instead of me having this prompt here, I'll try something again. And I'm going to say generate, let's see. So I have these fields here. I'm going to say generate 3 new products similar to a product with the following values. And then this is where, I'm actually doing this in the wrong place. Pretend I didn't say that. I'm going to refresh the page. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a record click action. So this is just me clicking on a button, not connected to anything, and it's generating more records. But I can do something a lot more dynamic. If I change this to a custom action for the row record click action, sorry, and then in here, I'm going to trigger the generate records. So I'll put my prompt in, generate 3 new products similar to a product with the following values. So I'm going to say name, and then I'm going to say record.name. And then I will say, then I'll say description, record.description. So this is where we're starting to get into this concept of dynamic variables. So the record variable, this is available to be used in this record click action. So what this is going to do is this is going to pull the name and the description of the product that I click on and then feed that into my AI request, which just means I'm going to have this cool little app that, based on the record that I click, it essentially multiplies that record with AI. So let's just see if it works. Last time I generated beachwear. This time I'm going to click on the smart LED light bulb, and we'll see if it does what I was hoping for. Great. So it's generated essentially 3 other lighting products, and totally random. I didn't give AI any description other than I selected my spreadsheet, which tells the AI which headers to generate, and I gave it those 2 values. You can take this much further. You can provide more context. You could provide some examples, but nonetheless, a very powerful action that can be integrated into really almost any aspect of your app. So that's a nice one. I think maybe I'll take another momentary break here, just because I think there's probably a few other things we can talk about.
Thanks for the break there, Patrick. I'm just noticing when you're sharing your screen, I can see my own video at the bottom right of your screen share. I'm wondering if that's like maybe slowing down the screen share. It's creating a bit of a delay. If you could just like remove that the next time you share your screen, I think that would help improve
Sure.
the performance of the video.
Yeah, there's a bit of a picture-in-picture situation.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, great. All right, so yeah, we'll see if during the next screen share that helps. And I saw there was a question about Airtable. So we're not doing any kind of caching on the Airtable. We are going through a bit of a security and compliance update right now, where we're trying to be very clear about sort of whether we're storing that data. And so right now, the default for users is that the data won't be stored, but we are looking into different options. It's a bit tough when we're using these external services, because the main benefit of using an external service is that the data is like updated in real time. And so then if we start caching it, then all of a sudden we are storing all your data. And I think a lot of users aren't wanting that. So we're definitely looking into all the different ways of doing this. And I think I mentioned it before, but we are most likely going to be offering like a frontly managed database option in the next couple months, which would essentially look like a very simplistic combination of Supabase and Airtable and Google Sheets, where you can kind of just quickly manage your data in some kind of basic spreadsheet interface, but also, of course, powered by a true scalable database. So that's something that we're looking into, but most users seem to be pretty happy with their data in the services that they have now. Looks like we've got a question from Les about the AI generation. So he's asking, how did AI generate the prices on the LED items? So that's just AI just coming up with random data. If I wanted to, in my prompt, I could give it slightly more specific instructions. And so maybe that's actually worth showing, because I did forget to go into that detail. You can actually provide on a per field level from your spreadsheet data, you can provide a little description for the AI, and then that sort of tunes the request further. So maybe I'll just jump back into a quick screen share here. We'll see if the picture in picture thing is gone. How does that look?
There we go.
Okay,
Yeah,
great, cool.
seems to be
All
better.
right. So if I go back to my my click action, and so you can see all that, like this is literally the only information that the AI has, other than through this action, we are passing the AI the context of the headers of your spreadsheet or data source. So we're not passing any of your data, just the knowledge of what fields exist, like what headers exist in your spreadsheet. And then we're forcing the AI to conform to that data structure. So that's why it's able to generate the exact fields. But familiar interface down here, similar to the form setup, if you click on a field, so let's say the price field, um, by default, there's the value is, this is if I want to override the value. So that is not something I'm going to do. That would be if I wanted to make sure it was like always a static value, not generated by AI. So I'll leave that blank. But if I want to add a description here, I can kind of tune this. So I could say a price between $10 and $30. And that will just ensure, or at least, oh, interesting. Did I not save that? Um, I'm not sure if there's a bug there or not. Let's say $10 to $30. Huh. Oh, it did save. Okay. Well, I think I'm oh, I'm silly. I did it in the wrong field. My mistake. Okay, good. No bugs, just me being silly. So I've told it to do $10 to $30. So that's like, it's as simple as that. For something like a description, you can do the same thing. You could say a concise product description fit for an e-commerce store under 100 characters. So, we're giving these constraints in essentially in plain text for the AI. And now, we can see what that does. It really comes down to what you're actually looking for, but let's try it. So we've got an ergonomic office chair. So let's see if it generates a few products similar to that. So this is where you can see that the AI is listening to our constraints, because obviously no office chair is going to be $30, but I forced it to be under $30, between 10 and 30. And so it did do what I asked. And the descriptions, although, yeah, extremely short descriptions, because I also limited it to 100 characters, which is very small for a description. So there you go, that you can kind of just describe in a little more detail for each field what you're looking for. You can also describe a little bit more in the actual prompt itself, but if it's like a per field thing, it's actually better to do it here, so the AI isn't trying to get confused about that. Great. So we'll keep moving on. I think I'm going to. I mean, okay. I'll talk about the JavaScript action. I don't think I'm going to go too deep into it, because it is an edge case. The JavaScript is really designed for manipulating data. So it's a little bit complicated, and honestly, I don't think it's worth us getting too crazy. But really, if you trigger a JavaScript action, you can use stuff like the response of another request and manipulate it. So maybe we can try one example, and then we'll go from there. So um, let's see. So I'm gonna get a record. Oh no, I'm gonna do my products Google Sheet. So you can see all the new fields that I've been adding through the AI actioner here. Now I'm gonna just select. Um, what do I want to do? Hey Justin, do we have? I think in our JavaScript help article, we might have an example that we could probably share. I'm wondering if you can help me maybe find that link and paste it into the chat so that I can just kind of jump in there. Um,
Sure.
Maybe as a starting point, I probably won't even involve records here. I think it's probably easier to just show that the JavaScript action does exist, and it basically allows you to um, enter like actual JavaScript code, and then the output is essentially just the return value. So again, this is not for people who uh, aren't. This is not a no code feature. This is one of the few features in Frontly where it's for people who understand some basics about coding. I guess if I want to do a really, really simple example, like you can actually just create a variable. So I could say, let value one equals apple. And I could say, let value two equals pie. And then I could say return let's see, how do I want to do this? I'll say return value one plus a little space plus value two. So theoretically, this should return the text apple pie. Let's just see if that works. And again, it's hard to give really specific examples for stuff like this because this is really meant for edge cases. It's not meant to be used in all aspects of Frontly. We've had users, I'm sure users can comment on this, especially in our Discord, but we've been seeing lots of users creating embed codes and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use this step variable, which allows me to reference the response of a previous step in a multi-step action. So I'm going to insert this step dot one. And because there's only one step, that was nice and simple. So, or sorry, there's one step and then there's the one that I'm using. Let's just see if I go to my page, if I can make this work. So I'm going to refresh the page. And now, yay, it's saying apple pie. So, to not spend too much more time on this, one of the more common use cases would be if you have data on a page. I think one of the examples we gave was you can actually use the block data that, like if you have a table on a page, you can use the block data variable and then you can do some sort of interesting things with that by referencing like block dot one, and then that kind of gets the data. So for people who have interest in this, we have a tutorial or we have a help article on this, and maybe I'll just release a separate video going over some more specifics because this one's a bit niche. And so I think for now, all you have to know is if you have values, you can grab them, you can use them in this JavaScript action, and then whatever you return from your JavaScript is going to be available in the subsequent steps. So that's all the time I'll spend on the JavaScript.
Patrick, I'm just going to give a little shout out to the JavaScript action article that I've now posted in the chat. So you can see a live example that Patrick used, another live example. And yeah, hopefully you get a better idea of what the JavaScript action can cover.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just there's a bit the use cases get pretty advanced, and it probably will require some trial and error to get the code right, and so it's it's something for another time. But yeah, anyone who's interested can check that out. So one of the newest features, which I know users have been asking for a million years, is the modal action. So this is pretty interesting. And what I'm going to have to do to even make this action work is I'm going to have to create a custom block. So this is a whole other feature. We've launched this a few months ago, so we're not going to go into too deep of detail here, but a custom block is another way to, there we go. So I'm going to say test block, just keep it nice and generic. But essentially, this is a way to surface some custom content inside a pop-up or a drawer. We have two options now, anywhere inside your app, just based on an action. So I'll create something that's really simple. Maybe it'll have some text, and I'll make this nice and large. I'm going to call this my test text. Then I'm going to add a button, and maybe let's see, what else can I add here? I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. Now, one thing that has been called out is that it looks like right now, for some technical reasons, once we launch this, it looks like the blocks like table and grid right now aren't actually loading data if you put them inside a custom block inside a modal. So that's something that we're going to be working on in the next few days. We'll be getting that working, so you could do it. But for now, it's really meant for some simple stuff. Like maybe you just want to have a totally custom pop up that could be something like, hey, username, user.first name, this is a custom pop-up. And then we can have this button say close pop-up, which I may as well show as an option as well. So you can do a lot of different stuff, but for now, I'll just keep it simple. So there's this modal action, and there are two style options, as we talked about. There's drawer and modal. So I'm going to set this button to actually hide the modal. And that's basically all I have to do here, because it's all I'm doing is hiding it. So this is a simple one. And then now that I've created this custom block, I can go back to my page. I can go to my modal action. And so all I have is a button. Nothing fancy. I haven't set this up yet. I'm going to add a modal action step. And this time I'm going to select the custom block. Because I'm selecting the show action, that means I'm trying to show the modal. The previous step that I set up in the custom block was actually a custom action to hide the modal from anywhere. So the label is the label that's going to pop up at the top of the modal. So I'm just going to say this is a custom pop-up, and I'll start with the modal, and then after we'll come back and I'll show you what the drawer looks like. So again, keeping things as basic as I can. Obviously, you can go into a lot more detail with all these different types of things. So I'm going to click on this button. You can see I have this custom pop-up. And so there's lots I can do. Obviously, I don't really love the spacing here. So I can just go back to my custom block, and I can add a background card to this entire thing. I can make it maybe even a little more padding if I want. So, really, really basic stuff here, but it allows you to be quite flexible with it. So if I go back, refresh my page, try this again, there, looks a little bit better. I mean, it's still pretty boring. It's not very well designed, but the functionality is there. It's up to you to come up with interesting things to actually put inside here. And then because I set up this button with a close modal action, I can also close it by clicking on that button. You don't have to do that. Clicking outside of a modal will automatically close it, and also clicking on the X will automatically close it. So you don't have to worry about it. The close modal action is just essentially for edge cases where you do want to be able to trigger something like maybe a navigate to page action while also forcing the modal to be closed. So pretty easy. Otherwise, the modal will stay open, I think, if you navigated to another page. So you do have to be deliberate about that. Now, the other thing which I wanted to show you is the drawer, because it's a very cool visualization. We have a bit of I think it kind of slides out from the side. So All I'm doing is changing that to drawer, and now I'm going to hit save. So I'm going to go back to my page, refresh once more, and now I've got this cool. Yeah, it slides out from the side. That's all it is. It's basically a modal that slides from the side, but it is a different user experience. So depends on what you need. It also depends on stuff like the height of your content. So you want to be thoughtful about what is the best interface. If it's a long, like if it's a very tall form or something like that, then yeah, you might want it to be if it's like a pop-up settings form, that kind of thing, then you might want to do that. So very cool. Something we haven't had for a long time. So that's a nice improvement. And um, there's really only a few more little things here. So Justin, unless there's anything that we want to touch on now, I can
Yeah,
keep
just
going.
just circling back to the JavaScript action, if you don't mind. Tituan, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, asks, is it possible to manage a table using JavaScript, like iterating through the data with a loop, I think is what he's asking. And if we can, well, I'll ask you that question first, and then there's a follow-up question.
Yeah. So I actually think that example is even in the help article, possibly. I'd have to double check after this webinar, but um, when data is loaded on a page, then you have the ability to use the block variable. So it's like block dot whatever the ID is, and that would access the full data of a table on the page, for example. And so then you can iterate through it. So I think there's an example of that. And if there isn't, like in the help article, and if there isn't, then we can make sure. Um, I think there are some other ways that let me just go back to this page for a second. There's I don't know if it's enabled yet, but there are a few ways that I've been wanting to enable JavaScript to work. So right now we have just the standard get, create, edit, and delete actions here. But one thing that I'm planning on doing is creating a get all records, or get a list of records option in here as well. That would enable some really fascinating things, because then you would be able to actually, with the button click, get your data from your Google Sheet, even if it isn't displayed in a block, and then iterate over it and do something with it. Now, the question is, what are you going to do with it? There are a lot of factors here, but yeah, there are some things coming up that will make it a little more interesting. But even as it is now, if your data is in a block like a table, then you should be able to iterate over that.
Awesome. And another follow-up question regarding the JavaScript integration. Can we imagine an e-commerce B2B use case with the JavaScript integration, or an other module like Stripe?
We're going to be integrating Stripe pretty soon. So I would say that part is not really a concern. And also, I have a feeling it would be impossible to make it secure if you were integrating it with JavaScript on the client side. Keep in mind, JavaScript can be viewed by anyone. It is essentially just visible in the network, because that's how that's how web browsers work. So don't use JavaScript and put API keys and things like that in there. Just as just a warning, because that's just how it is. That's not like a friendly thing. That's just in general. You kind of want your security stuff to be on the back end side. So keep that in mind. But yeah, we'll be there are some, I'm sure there's a lot of things you can do with JavaScript. I've been already very impressed with what everybody has done. People have been triggering chat bots and things like that. So as long as it's not like a super secure thing that, nobody should be able to access without a password, then, you can do that. But I think for stuff like payments, there's enough security requirements around that we're going to want to make that built in. And that is coming pretty soon. So, don't have an exact date to provide at this moment, but fairly soon.
Yeah, just the age-old question around the ability to embed into our pages, and it's got, every webinar it's almost like we cover this once every time. So just a good way to
Yeah.
level set with the user base again.
Yeah, exactly. And so we have our iframe block, which does tend to work for a lot of embeds. And I think we've even recently made some improvements to allow stuff like full screen pop-ups from within that. So there's some things that have been happening there. And then, yeah, just the raw JavaScript action can sort of handle some other stuff. So great. Well, we have about 15-ish minutes left, and so I think I have time to cover these last topics here. And so set form values. I mean, honestly, it's so simple. I don't even know if it's really worth going too crazy on, but I'll just do a really quick example. So I'm adding a form, and I'll make it an edit form. So all that means is I've typed in row ID to this example would not really be generally used in your live app because you'd probably want your row ID to be dynamic. But in this case, just to make it simple, I'm deliberately just loading that ID with row number 2 on this page. Now, if I go back to my page and I add a button, I'm going to say, there's two options. So there's clear form values, which if I use the set form values and then I trigger the clear option, this should theoretically clear all the form values. Let's see if it works. So it's always fun just testing everything on a live webinar. Great. So we've got this. And if I click clear, you can see it just clears the entire form. So I don't know if you would use that on an edit form because that would, I mean, it would allow you to change the values entirely and then hit save. So that's totally possible. And then the other option is if you just want to, instead of clearing the whole form, if you just want to set a specific value for a specific form, then you have to choose the form and then you have to do it by the key. So this is just the exact field name from your spreadsheet. Again, it is case sensitive. You might even want to just copy and paste if you're not certain about how you've labeled them. In my case, I always keep it with that snake case. So I know how to just type them in without worrying about it. Now I'm going to say testing 1, 2, 3. So all we're going to get here is my form is going to load and it's going to have the values from the spreadsheet. But then you can see this description field. I didn't rename this button, but it is not clearing it anymore. It's just setting the value for that. So it's a simple thing. We just didn't have it before. And now, with every new feature like this, we open up a lot of new possibilities. So we're excited to see users getting a lot of value from that. And we don't have to talk about that one anymore. The spinner action is also pretty simple. We'll do a really, really simple example here. So we're going to say set spinner, and I'm going to create an action, and it's going to have 3 steps. The first step is going to be a spinner, and I'm going to select the show action, and I can even provide some custom text if I want. So I could just say waiting for 3 seconds, and then normally you would do this on a click of a button or on a form submission, or we have some built-in loading spinners that automatically happen throughout the app, but this is more for cases where you just want to really show that full screen spinner in case you're waiting on something in particular. Just so that I can make this work without having to do anything fancy, I'm going to add a time delay step for 3 seconds. And then I'm going to add another spinner, but this time it's going to be the hide spinner. And there's no other configuration required there because you can only have one spinner at a time. So it's either on or off, and that's basically it. So I'm going to reload my page here and go over to my spinner. So I'm going to click on that. It says waiting for 3 seconds, and then it turns off. That's it. It's just one more piece of functionality that allows you to be more in control. And you should be able to use variables in there too if you wanted. You could have the username or whatever. But for the most part, you're probably just going to say loading information or, loading products or, saving your submission, whatever you want to do. It just allows you to, have this visual control over your app. Don't leave the users hanging. Now, the web scraper. So this is cool. We have this. I've just copied our template app because we have one that you can install, which is exactly this. So I probably won't even try to go out of my way to do anything too fancy, but I can talk about it. So this is a standalone input block. It's just like a single form field. That's it. In this case, all I wanted was that one field. I gave it the URL field ID, and then I just give it a placeholder, but that doesn't really matter. And then I've created a button which does fire 4 actions. The very first one is the web scraper, and that takes the form.url variable. And so all it does is it passes the URL that the user enters into the web scraper. The web scraper action is very, very simple. It doesn't actually do any AI stuff or summarizing or anything itself. It just scrapes the raw text content essentially from the web page, if available, and then returns it. And so what happens is the next step in this action gets the step.1 variable, which is the response of step one. And then it says, summarize the following website content into 5 bullet points in Markdown format. So this is my AI. This is me saying to the AI, hey, this is what I want. And there's really nothing else fancy there. So that's just a really important thing to be aware of, is that if you use the web scraper, you'll pretty much always want to be passing that data into an OpenAI request. Or if you wanted to send it to some third-party platform, I guess you could do it in like a webhook action. So once we get the response of this AI action, then we're going to set this local state value of summary to the step.2 variable, which is the response of step 2, which is the AI response. And then last but certainly not least is I am saving the form.url variable and the AI response into this summaries Google Sheet, which all it has right now is the most basic example there. So if I go back to my app, I'm hoping this just works, even though this is just the template. So you should be able to essentially install this. So let's try doing the Apple website again, because I think not all websites allow for you to make a request to get the text content. So that's just something we've noticed. Like, I think probably they have different security settings. It might not work on every website. I think it works on Apple. So if I click summarize web page, it starts loading, and hopefully we'll get a nice little AI summary. Nice. There we go. So this is a 5 bullet point summary of the live content from the apple.com website. So very, very powerful, because you can ask the AI to generate whatever you want. It's not, this is just plain text, and I specifically said 5 bullet points. Instead, you could say a 3-paragraph summary, or you could trigger the generate records action, and you could say generate 3 products based on the content you find on this web page, and it would generate some Apple-y kind of products. So yeah, very powerful. Definitely recommend spending some time playing around with that. It's very fun, especially in conjunction with AI generation. So although it feels like we're at the end of my list of pages, there is something that I've been teasing, which is we're going to be launching a brand new, basically next generation form system. It's a new block, and it's not live yet, but I'm working on it as we speak, and I have a version of it that I can showcase. So this is very early, and I just want to explain some of the cool stuff that we're going to be able to enable. So for one, the new form is going to have much more standardized sort of spacing and styling, the ability to determine the number of total columns worth of potential fields. Like, this is a 2-column wide form, and I've manually determined that these are only 1 column wide out of 2, but if I want, I can increase the width. So for example, if I wanted this field to be wider, I can set it to 2 columns, and then it fills that. Now, we do have that in the current form. It's just not very obvious. But we're also introducing a few new large format form fields, such as this multi-select, which allows you to either make it checkboxes or radio buttons. So it can be either a single option in like a radio list, or it can be a multi-select. You can choose to have it in multiple different styles, and you'll be able to determine whether you want them to be horizontal or whether vertical. And it's just, we're just trying to lean into this idea that there are lots of very nice looking form field types that we could offer. And right now, a lot of our field types are pretty basic, and we'll still have all the standard field types. You can see here, this is a new document upload field. And so it will be able to, it's a nice full width field. You'll be able to customize the text. And when you upload a document, you'll see a little document sort of box appear. So that's going to be pretty cool. Now, these are actually small changes compared to a few other ideas here. So one is the concept of field groups. So you can see here, I can turn on and off the labels for these groups. And I've manually created these three groups here: basics, other info, and outputs. And so I'm able to select which fields go into which group. This doesn't affect the functionality of the form at all. It just allows me to visually distinguish between the groups. There's even different styles. So I can say the groups should all be these cards where they're sort of isolated in a fully wrapped box, or I can set it to border, which essentially just adds this nice divider between the sections. We spent a lot of time over the last few weeks looking at how other applications with really nice designs handle forms, and we've realized a few things. Often there are lots of dividers between sections to reduce overwhelm. Often there aren't even labels of the sections. It's just a matter of, you just have these nice dividers between groups of fields just to make it feel a little bit better. And then components like this tend to just be in their own section. So it's like a nice large section, totally separated from the others. And yeah, these are just some of the things that we're adding to the form. But maybe still the biggest change is the entire new form system is going to be based on this concept of sections. And we're still working out the terminology, but you're going to have 4 options for the way that these sections work. You can see here that this is a tab system. So right now I have 2 sections, and the default is this horizontal tab. So this is us giving the ability to have the logic of managing multiple tabs, like in a multi-page settings form, all within a single block. You don't have to hack things together. You don't have to try to use local state or manage any of that kind of stuff. We'll make it easy to, still manage the submission of the data. So that's huge. But then in addition to that, we're also going to have the option for vertical tab-based system, which will look something like this. And we're going to have the option for a multi-step sort of wizard style form. And so this is even more sophisticated, where you'll still just define the form fields and you'll determine the order. So you can just drag and drop the order of the sections. And then Frontly will manage this concept of the user having to go through and submit each step to eventually get to the final step. And so this would be great for user onboarding, maybe any kind of multi-step content creation flow. So we're really excited about this. And then last but not least is the just another style format. We'll have this nice sort of vertical progress option too. So compared to Frontly's current form system, there's just some really nice sort of style improvements. We're going to make it really nice and clean and standardized, have some more nice large field types, and some new functionalities such as the document upload, which is going to allow you to process the content of text documents and hopefully soon also process the text out of images and then feed that into an AI action to generate records or generate, a blog post or whatever you want. So hopefully you're all as excited as I am about the new form system. Not sure if that's possible, but anyway, thank you all for watching so far. I know that was a lot of information to take in. So if you're still here, you're great fans, and we appreciate it.
Patrick, I don't know if you saw like any of the reactions coming through as you were showing off the new feature form feature, but they were just flooding in. Like
I don't think I did, actually. I was too
okay,
focused.
yeah. And this is my first time seeing it too. This looks fantastic. There was one question I think that pertained to the feature. Would conditional logic be available within the form system there, the new form doc?
Yeah, I think probably on a section level and on a group level and then on the field level as well. So, you could even have, I guess, theoretically conditional steps in your onboarding flow depending on what the user sort of responded in the past. So we admit this is a big update. Like the concept of the stage based form is like there's going to be a lot of things to figure out, but I'm kind of hoping that in the next 2 weeks, we'll be able to put some version of this out for beta users who are interested in helping us kind of hack around and break it without having to worry about if it's like totally production ready. So yeah, there's definitely gonna be that. I did see someone was asking about document storage. So that's a concept that until now we haven't really had to worry about it too much because we really, we have the image upload and we do technically have the file upload, but there hasn't been a lot of great use case for it. And so we are going to be having to implement some some kind of document system, and there will be some limit. There will have to be obviously probably a max file size and a total storage. We're going to have to be we're essentially working on a hosting system for documents so that we can figure out how to make that fair. Because you're going to want yourselves to know and be able to limit your users from uploading documents of a certain size or maybe maximum amount of documents because in the modern AI world, being able to upload and parse giant PDFs and things like that, very, very high value, but also could easily, add up in terms of file storage. So we'll see how that goes. We're very excited. It may be, a couple weeks for us to kind of work through some of these things, but we're really excited about that.
Awesome. More questions to come out of this sneak preview. Are the tabs coming to blocks throughout Frontly or just in forms, do you think, with the advent of
Um,
the tab system?
it's a good question. I mean, in this case, the concept of tabs is so like deeply built into this new form that it's kind of its own thing. I mean, we could allow probably separately, we can offer some sort of tab system. I've thought about making it a block of its own. Um, we just haven't quite figured out exactly user experience wise, like how would you determine what shows when? So it's something that we're considering. Like it may be maybe it's a block of its own that allows you to select other blocks you've already created, like how the modal worked or something like that. But yeah, I think it's a concept that makes sense. We're just sort of recognizing that tabs, at least in like a settings form and or in the progress based form, are like pretty commonplace, and so nice to have that built in without having to worry about it. So we'll see.
Awesome. One more question. Is it possible to trigger an action after each section is filled, even before all other sections are filled out?
That is a great question. I've been asking myself the same thing as I'm still essentially designing this feature. But I think yes. So the way that I'm building it right now, and there, again, we'll probably have more feedback as we, have users help us in the beta stage. But right now, I'm treating every section, so each tab or step in the progress form, as its own form. It's like they're not like really connected to each other, and so functionality wise I think there'll be sort of the standard submission, which is similar to the current form, where if it's connected to a spreadsheet, we'll either create or update, and then you'll have the option to trigger a custom submit action. So I think we'll just keep it as simple as that. You'll be able to if you want to. Um, the only thing that we're still kind of figuring out is in terms of how we sort of help guide that logic. I guess it will allow you to set your own custom action, and then we'll still navigate them to the next step or something like that. We might even have to have, we'll have to consider form validation for the step based form. So it's like you can't progress if you've submit like an invalid value. So that's a whole other thing. So yeah, it'll be interesting to dig into these, but at least hopefully the standard stuff will be available when the beta is ready.